Whoa, is this a precursor for the big one that is overdue? These California earthquake swarms that just popped up have everyone on alarm. It's everywhere in the news, and people are panicking. You're writing me comments because, especially this morning, we have to say, California's earthquake map has changed. And the most important development that we see there right now is not the biggest earthquake that also appeared there on the map. We have to say at 8:30 this morning local time, we had an earthquake that struck just north of San Leandro. That is the San Francisco Bay Area. San Andreas Fault is there. We know that. So initially they said it's magnitude 4.1. That is not like a, oh my God, she's hit the fizzy thing in California. That's basically like, okay, normal, what's next, right? Then it was revised to 3.8. So that's not the one that where we're like, oh, but listen, only about 5 kilometers, like 3 miles deep. So shallow, extremely close to the Hayward Fault. And don't get this in the wrong alley here that you're saying, oh, Hayward Fault, so it's not San Andreas Fault. If you follow my channel, you know how dangerous the Hayward Fault is. And we know the branched out and parallel faults can trigger the other fault. But Hayward Fault on its own is already. But listen, guys, what came after that? Something came after that. Only 37 minutes later, another earthquake hit. Magnitude 3.0. And then 4 seconds later, a 2.8 struck almost at the same place. Same place here is the issue. What is going on there? So while that was happening, the earthquake sequence down near Pinnacles had also not stopped. So there is activity near Corona in Southern California, activities at the geysers at the north, and now the sequence at East Bay. So everywhere along the danger zone, we're like, whoa, this is the problem. And these are not aftershocks from one earthquake. Also, I want to make that sure. These are separate areas that are becoming active during the same short window of time. That's the thing. We always see, oh, there's an earthquake swarm at Southern California, maybe Salton Sea, where we think everything's locked and loaded. Then we see something in the Bay Area. Then we see something in Northern California. But the time window is the issue here. That's why everyone is so like, whoa, this is a little bit concerning. So, and of course, that changes the question completely that we have to ask now. Because yesterday, there was something going on already. I watched it and I was like, no, I'm not really concerned yet. Yesterday, looked mainly like an interesting swarm near the San Andreas Fault. Interesting, that for sure. Today, it doesn't. And there is one thing about this new San Leandro sequence that makes the next 24 to 48 hours more important. And when I just said today it doesn't mean it's not of interest anymore, but everything has evolved into that it is interesting. So I say the next 2 days are important, and I tell you why, because of where this is happening. Epicenter of this current swarm sits less than 2 miles northeast of San Leandro, close to Oakland and almost directly beside the Hayward Fault system. USGS says the earthquake's motion is consistent with the Hayward Fault. I'm talking about the biggest one there now, the 4.1 AK 3.8. They say it is consistent, but the scientists cannot say whether the rupture actually occurred on the main Hayward Fault itself or on a smaller nearby structure. And that uncertainty that we have now, that matters a lot, guys, because this is not some insignificant fault hidden somewhere in an empty part of California. You heard me say Bay Area, Oakland, major population hub, right? San Leandro, Berkeley, Hayward, Fremont, millions of people live throughout this region. And we've just seen in Colombia what happened if something happens underneath a densely populated area. And that earthquake in Colombia wasn't even shallow, but it was devastating. I'll put that in the end screen. So they actually slowed down trains after this morning happened after the earthquake. Tracks were inspected then, so thankfully no significant damage was immediately detected, but that location then after that got the attention very, very quickly, and we see it in news stations. And I want to tell you now the first important twist that happened since then. So if we're talking about the magnitude 3.8 itself, again, I said not alarming. California is used to that. Interesting part is location, yes, but what appeared around this earthquake. So San Leandro is not Pinnacles. It's roughly 100 miles, around 160 kilometers away. So the Pinnacles sequence did not somehow crawl north and then turn into the San Leandro sequence. These earthquakes are separate earthquake sequences. So, and that means that if we look at the map of California, it now contains activity on different portions of the broader, this is how it's called, San Andreas transform system almost at the same time. So that still does not mean that these faults are triggering each other right now, but it does make the picture, I'm wording this carefully here not to be alarming, it does make the picture more interesting than just one isolated swarm. And before I'm getting to whether any of this could actually be the precursor to the big one, look at what's still happening farther south. Pinnacles sequence began with the magnitude 3.9 and a dense group of smaller earthquakes around it. And since then, these smaller events have continued. Magnitude 2.1 on August 12th, then another magnitude 1.9 early this morning, August 13th, only about 4 kilometers, that's 2.5 miles deep. So Pinnacles has not gone quiet yet at all, but something very important has not happened there either. There has not been another earthquake equal or larger than that was happening there at magnitude 3.9. And that is important because there's a huge difference between like basically a sequence continuing with magnitudes 1s and 2s and a sequence that basically begins producing progressively stronger earthquakes. So far, Pinnacles is persistent. It's not clearly accelerating for now. But there's another reason Pinnacles, as I would call it, like interesting or even fascinating. So this part there of Central California sits near the creeping section of the San Andreas Fault. In that area, the San Andreas Fault behaves differently from the image that most people have in their heads when they think about the San Andreas Fault. So some fault sections can remain locked while elastic strain is building. So other sections can slowly creep. So the two sides move gradually past one another without all that movement being stored in one big rupture. So a cluster of small earthquakes that is happening around Pinnacles does not automatically mean the San Andreas is beginning the countdown towards the big one. If we were to say that, and anyone who would say that, that's an enormous leap. So we're not saying that. But now let's put Pinnacles aside for a moment, because the earthquake that is so important for today's story that I want to tell you is still San Leandro. Hayward Fault last produced its famous, we have to say, major earthquake in 1868. USGS estimates that event was about magnitude 6.8. And guys, 6.8, if that is shallow underneath highly densely populated areas, California openly states they're not ready for the big one with the buildings and everything. So it was one of the most destructive earthquakes in California history at a time when the Bay Area looked like nothing like the urban region that exists here today. And I'm giving you a number next that is worth to really understand it properly and let it sink in. The long-term USGS forecast gives the San Francisco Bay region a 72% probability of at least one magnitude 6.7 or greater earthquake before 2043. So between now and then. 72%. So this is basically can happen at any time, right? But there's something there that is very, very crucial. Listen to this. Today's magnitude 3.8 did not suddenly create that 72% risk. The risk already existed before today, of course. The Hayward Fault was already very dangerous yesterday. So it was dangerous last year. I want to make that clear. And it will remain dangerous whether this sequence stops tonight or continues tomorrow. But when we have a new earthquake sequence that appears besides a fault, with that kind of long-term, 2043, I would call that short-term hazard, we need to look at this, definitely. So zoom out again, because another cluster has appeared around Corona in Southern California. This is hundreds of miles from San Leandro, and then go north. The geysers is active again as well. Big hydrothermal area, right? That's why the geysers, and I've mentioned that often, it needs to be separated from the others immediately. It's a geothermal field where earthquakes are extremely common. So this is not something that should alarm us. We have steam extraction and fluid injection associated with geothermal energy production, and that induces many, many small earthquakes there. So putting every earthquake at the geysers on a map and treating it like evidence that California's major faults are suddenly waking up would absolutely be misleading. So geysers is active, but it's normally active. But San Leandro is the new piece of the puzzle here. And it gets uncomfortable if we keep asking questions, because the question, could this morning's magnitude 3.8 be a foreshock? My answer is yes, absolutely. Yes, it could. But my answer needs a gigantic qualification, I would say. When it comes to earthquakes, we cannot identify a foreshock when it happens. Only if we have a larger main shock and then smaller aftershocks, we know what was the foreshock, right? Until then, it's simply an earthquake. Worldwide, USGS says the chance of an earthquake being followed by a larger earthquake nearby within roughly 1 week is around 5%. Well, tell this to Venezuela. Magnitude 7.2 and 39 seconds later, magnitude 7.5. That is just roughly 6 weeks ago. So yes, overwhelming majority are not followed by something larger, but that doesn't help you if shizzy hits the fizzy in your place, like in the case of Venezuela, right? 5%, yeah, this is where we have a lot of uncertainty that is lying there. Nobody watching an earthquake in real time knows which category it belongs to yet. Venezuela, 7.2, I'm sure they thought this is the main thing, right? But they didn't have much time to think, 39 seconds, right? But again, we have a lot of sensational claims that are going around right now, and they can go wrong badly, I would say. A swarm is not proof of an approaching major earthquake. Several swarms are also still not proof. Magnitude 3.8 besides a major fault is not proof. Small swarms and moderate earthquakes are frequently claimed as earthquake precursors, especially in California. But most such proposed precursors occur without a major earthquake that would follow them. So no, currently science cannot say this is the precursor to California's big one, but that does not mean that nothing here is worth watching, right? Because there's now a very specific problem / question that we have. Will these earthquakes decay over the next few hours and days, or does this pattern change again? That is what we need to watch out for, right? Right now, San Leandro has produced 3.8, then 3.0, then 2.8. That is exactly the direction that as scientists we would rather want to see, right? Not getting larger. Smaller aftershocks following the largest event. At Pinnacles, same basic thing is true. Strongest event remains 3.9 for now. The later earthquakes have been smaller. So at this moment, there is no clear magnitude escalation. But imagine that the map would change again. Not another magnitude 1, right? Not another tiny geyser earthquake. Another magnitude 4 or stronger near San Leandro. Magnitude 4.5 or stronger at Pinnacles. A new magnitude 4 plus earthquake that would appear independently along another major Bay Area fault, or magnitudes beginning to increase again instead of decrease, would change the story in a heartbeat. Absolutely, that would be more alarming. There's another small signal that would matter even more than just the raw earthquake numbers, and that is movement. Movement. What do I mean by this? Watch where the earthquakes occur, actually. So if San Leandro stays confined to one tiny patch and then slowly fades, that's one picture. If Pinnacles stays concentrated around the same area and continues declining, that's another. But if earthquake locations begin migrating along a fault line, begin appearing at the edge of a sequence, then we have a different pattern that we need to evaluate, right? That's why if we just say, whoa, California had 50 earthquakes, that tells almost nothing by itself. Really, it doesn't tell anything. California has enormous earthquakes every day. Not enormous, an enormous amount of tiny earthquakes. If you look at the USGS map, it's shaking there every day. It's full of dots, right? Southern California alone averages like thousands of earthquakes every year. What is the key point is where do they happen? How large do they become? How does the sequence evolve? And does this activity behave differently from the local background? If you look at the map, I have one final detail that you should really look at. San Leandro was not completely quiet before today. Magnitude 7 magnitude, God, guys, I need to sleep. Magnitude 2.7 just northeast of San Leandro in July 22nd, also only a few kilometers deep. Yeah, that means very little if we just look at that. So small earthquakes happen around the Bay Area. But now, a stronger magnitude 3.8 occurred in almost the same broader region less than a month later. Again, I'm not calling this a precursor pattern yet, but another reason not to ignore what happens next. We need to have a look at this. I think that the question that we have today is the bigger question. Why are several separate parts of California active during the same time period? And does the activity fade from here, or does another major fault join the map? We do have a change today that makes us look at the map closer. And from now on, after this video, what we need to look out forward is basically we need to look at the earthquakes that haven't happened yet. Sounds crazy, but they matter the most. And if nothing happens, good. I will keep you updated, guys, but I have news from Colombia that are really like, the numbers are shocking, and the new videos that we're now they keep slowly coming in. It looks strange. The shaking, this looks like, not like, it looks like wobbling, really, really weird. Check it out here in the end screen. Stay safe.